nice to start with the fact that the presenter before me raised the fact that their work is a work in progress, and mine is also a work in progress. The obvious difference is the fact that why they have funding to do the work, I don't. So I have been, it's for me it's just a personal drive, and the love for research, like I always tell my colleagues, that moved me into research like this outside the main research which I do and all that. And so basically that's what I'm looking at. So the topic as it stands is exploring African perspectives on climate geoengineering engagement, a survey. So I'll be contextualizing that, and basically discussing as a context. We'll be speaking to the choir, just singing to the choir. We are familiar with the fact that our world is dying, and there are different school of thought arguments for and against the dying world. Why some people will claim yes, it's not dying per se. We know that a whole lot of things are happening to the world, right? As relating to climate change and the likes. And we said that most of what is happening is caused by human activities, basically. Majorly human activities. In as much as nature is involved, and some people like that more or less an auto reset of the world. But we know that the change itself is happening faster than it should be, quote unquote, auto reset. And basically, the activities of man leads to the generation of more greenhouse gas emission, which leads to temperature increase generally in the world. And this temperature increase, we know, leads to climate change. So basically, this is just the context in which the world is as we speak. And if you notice from this graph, this is from the IPCC, and you notice that the emission trajectory pre-industrial level and now, you realize that there's been a continuous increase. And the projection is that if we continue business as usual, this red graph will be the ICP 8.5 is the trajectory in which the world is going by. And the projected temperature increase is what we have in the second graph, showing the different scenarios in which we are familiar with, the different ICP projection that will happen in the world. But for us to reduce this and probably come back to temperature increase that will be within the space of the pre-industrial level, there has to be a substantial action of reducing or keeping temperature within the 1.5 projection of the IPCC. There has to be a conscious effort for us to keep temperature within this particular projection of the IPCC. And to do that, it implies that we are supposed to consciously reduce emission by 5%, and the global net emission is supposed to consciously reduce every year by 5%, right? And then the temperature itself is supposed to consciously be reduced by 3% every year. The truth that is what we need for us to stay within the industrial level as it is. But what is the reality of the world? Can we consciously do this? Can we consciously ensure that we have temperature maintained between the 1.5 to 2 degree as projected by ICPC using all these projection scenario and the likes? The truth is that temperature increase will continue regardless, even if we are able to maintain that particular percentage and keep emission at zero level. Temperature increase will still continue for many years to come. And if temperature will continue for many years to come, it implies that climate change will continue and the effect of climate change will continue, and the world, it's practically a doomsday message as it is. But we're also familiar with the fact that there are different talks on how do we mitigate this, and this is where climate intervention options come to play. There are different sustainability talking about normativity, for instance, whereby we talk about the behaviors in which we carry out as people. If human activity is a result of climate change, if we change our behavior, probably we'll be able to change emission reduction over time and all that. So the discourse on normativity, sustainability, and the likes. The discourse on adaptation, how do we adapt and all that. So in one of the climate interventions that is growing, the discourse around it is growing, is still, I'll still talk about how unknown this is climate engineering. And for political reasons, to be politically correct, scholars around climate engineering now prefer that you refer to it as climate intervention and not climate engineering, like not geoengineering, right? And I'll also speak to that. So the idea of geoengineering itself is, in a way, the conscious attempt to avoid those doomsday scenarios which I just painted. It's a conscious attempt to reduce climate change, to reduce temperature using machine technology, or in a layman terms is what we call trying to air condition the world. Basically, that's what it implies in the layman terms. But in essence, it just implies the use of machine technologies to ensure that we reduce the implications or the impact of climate change, and that to reduce the implication of climate change, eliminate greenhouse gases, while exploring other options. Basically, this is very important for scholars of geoengineering to say that geoengineering itself is not an option in itself, but it is a quick fix to the world we have now, so that to ensure that while we are trying to still be alive, because only when we are alive that we can find solution to climate change. If we are not there, then what's the point of solution, right? So, geoengineering quote unquote is like, okay, we are using these to pending when we find the permanent solution to the issue of climate change. So basically, that's the idea around geoengineering. And basically, there are two types. We have the carbon dioxide removal as well as the solar radiation management. I will not bore you with this, but basically that's the entire geoengineering proposal using carbon dioxide removal or solar radiation management. Okay? So, like I said, it's the last exit strategy to address global warming as it is. Now, the general inclination when it comes to geoengineering is that it is largely unclear. What geoengineering itself implies and the implication of geoengineering is largely unclear. And there are different arguments for and against geoengineering. Should we, quote unquote, geoengineer the world? Like I said, just like we have here now, the weather is cold, we can make it warm, or the weather is hot, we can make it cold and all that. That's very simplistic geoengineering. So there are different arguments as relating to it, and there are examples that people have come up with, scholars that are for geoengineering research, for instance, talk about eruptions, mountain eruptions and the likes, and how it has cooled the earth over time, and if we can do that in different ways. So basically that's done. So three fundamental inclinations to geoengineering. First is that the subject itself is generally unfamiliar around the greater population of the world, know very little when it comes to geoengineering, right? And it is possible, and we'll see in the data I'm going to show. So like I said, most people don't know geoengineering itself, right? And so the man on the ordinary person on the street probably have not had anything around geoengineering. So that's the first thing. And the second inclination is the fact that we talk about the risky nature of geoengineering. It is an effort that if we start, it becomes difficult to go back. We cannot undo what we would have done when it comes to the issue of geoengineering. It's grievous, and the implication is enormous, right? So for that reason, there has to be a lot of research. In fact, the arguments we make here is the fact that in as much as what we know that we don't know some things around geoengineering, and it's also unfortunate that we don't even know what we don't know around geoengineering. There's a lot that is yet to be familiar with. So for that reason, it is a risky endeavor for the world to embark on. The collateral damage that will come as a result of geoengineering is quite enormous. And then the moral hazard that comes to that. And this moral hazard is both horizontal and vertical. First, you look at the moral hazard in the sense that when you carry out geoengineering, while some regions of the world will benefit from the geoengineering engagement, deployment in which you are going to carry out, some other regions of the world will also be affected, right? So it's not a win-win situation, it's a win-lose situation, right? So for instance, if Canada decides to do a level of geoengineering, probably try to warm up the climate, considering the temperate here, or maybe because it's too cold, and they decide to warm up the climate in Canada, the implication of that for temperate region is that that place becomes too hot for habitation, which implies that there will be more deaths there and the likes. And then when it comes to agriculture and the likes, you realize that the vulnerability of different people also comes to play. Economic vulnerability in terms of the coping strategy which these people have. So that's one side of the moral aspect of it. And scholars around environmental justice, for instance, will argue around this to say why some people will benefit, others won't. And the number of people that will not, mostly, quote unquote, is in the global south, right? So that's another aspect of the hazard of it. And then other people look at it also from a religious inclination to say, practically what we are doing is playing God, right? You can heat up or cool off the earth and the likes. So it's practically like playing God. So a lot of people are also very skeptical when it comes to that. So basically, these are the central inclination to geoengineering. And like I said, how does, when you pick it from the space of the moral hazard, most importantly, and the implication for the developing world. So, like we said, within the developing world, in as much as the implication of geoengineering will affect the developing more on the ground that they are more vulnerable. Developing world in the sense of, especially Africa, they are vulnerable to climate change, right? And geoengineering definitely will affect them as much as possible. And another example in Africa is the fact that another thing to consider in Africa is the fact that a large population, over 70% of the population in Africa, are agriculture dependent, right? So the implication on climate change either way has a lot of effects on people in Africa. So the first thing within the developing world is that you realize that the debate is largely unpopular among policymakers and researchers in Africa. When you pick up articles on geoengineering, even what we have in the literature now, you realize that very few people from Africa or the developing world are actually talking about the topic. And that's the motivation for this particular research, that and even the position of Africa, for instance, on geoengineering is said or put forward by somebody in the global north. So somebody in the global north giving out the position of Africa as it is. So that's one issue around that. And then, like I said, the vulnerability of Africa to climate change, and then the policy implication of geoengineering. If it is deployed, the implication for Africa is enormous. Like I said, first and foremost, we do not know the risks if a deployment of geoengineering is carried out, right? And for that reason, we expect that, and considering the vulnerability of Africa, we expect that more Africans and generally people from the developing world, which will be affected more negatively by a deployment, if the deployment goes wrong, should be concerned about geoengineering, should be concerned about the research on geoengineering and knowing how it will affect them and all that. So that is also largely missing in Africa. And then the perception of the aim of this study is to explore people's perception within the global south on geoengineering research and application in itself. I'm concerned here. I just want to know, because in the literature you realize that, like I said, the position of the global south is declared by scholars in the global north. So the essence of this work itself is to gauge what is the people in Africa, what are they saying when it comes to geoengineering. And the idea for me using listening theory basically is that I believe that when the topic itself is put forward to Africans and to researchers and scholars in Africa, they can actually work on it. Okay, so I'm not going to bore you on listening to it because I have 2 minutes. So basically, this is the framework for the research in itself. And I believe that we need to talk more about it. We need to interact about the subject for us to have people. So the methodology which I've carried out is an online survey, and I've used simultaneous sample. I use convenient simple random sampling as well as snowballing. So what I've done, like I said, because I don't have funding for this, I reach out to my contacts, and then I encourage them to also send it to others, right? So that's where the simultaneous simple random sampling comes in. Online contacts, and anybody in Africa I just get to meet, I share the link with them, and then so we have been moving on that ground. So I have 10 questions I've asked, and the initial population target was to have 5,400 participants, 5,400. The idea around this is that we have 54 countries in Africa. A minimum of 100 persons per country will help us do the work, and then to do a thematic and descriptive analysis. As I speak to you as of yesterday night, when I checked the survey, right? And that was the reason why I did not send this to the discussant. As of yesterday night, when I checked the survey, we are 845 people have filled the survey thus far. And when it comes to knowledge on climate change, I realized that a lot of people have knowledge on climate change. About 96% of the people that fill this survey have knowledge on climate change, general knowledge on climate change and its impact. When it comes to knowledge on geoengineering, interestingly, about 73% of the population have no knowledge on geoengineering entirely. They've not heard about it before. Okay? So basically, when it comes to the controversies around climate change, I asked this question: will they be consigned? A lot of them said they will be consigned. 87% will be consigned about about geoengineering research. When it comes to if it will be beneficial to them, will they still be consigned if the geoengineering research will be beneficial to them? A lot of them said they will allow geoengineering to happen if it will be beneficial to them. That's about 93% of the population. And then when it comes to if geoengineering has outdoor implication, will they still be consigned? Realize that the large chunk of them, over 60% were concerned as relating to that. And then I also asked questions around the agreement, whether they strongly agree or disagree to questions around geoengineering. When it comes to geoengineering as a moral hazard, you realize that people that agree, strongly agree, and a little bit agree are more, while a large chunk of people were neutral about it. I asked question around if it will support their livelihood, would they be okay with geoengineering if it will support their livelihood, and a lot of them strongly agree with that, and on and on. And then I also asked the question around religion. Okay, so this is very important. I'll just say in 2 minutes, in 1 minute. If they feel that the manipulation of the climate is a crime, and a crime to humanity and offense to God, a large number of people are in agreement with the fact that it's a crime to humanity, and if they are concerned that it is an excuse by the rich, the Western country, to weaponize geoengineering is an excuse by Western country, and a lot of people also are in agreement to that. And then a concern whether their decisions in itself, if their opinion, it will be accepted within Africa. The opinion on the environment, if they think that it's of any relevance, and most of them argue that yes, they feel that their opinion does not matter. I think my time is up, so I'll just leave it there. So my preliminary conclusion as it stands are these 5 points. I feel that more engagement needs to be done as relating to geoengineering. Africa needs to be involved in the discussion on geoengineering intervention or climate intervention. We cannot assume the position of Africa. We need to ask Africans what they feel about it. There needs to be more engagement, and our policy needs to be proactive rather than reactive. Thank you very much.